All right, so for our 11 o'clock session, we're really fortunate to be able to highlight today's SASEDay with a session on executive perspectives and a panel of executives across several different industries and several different geographies. This will take some of the foundational concepts that we heard about today, some of the customer use case perspectives that we heard about today, and then overlay them with the perspectives from the folks that you see on the screen here. So with us today is David Levine from Ricoh USA, Peter Rucys from Tampa General, Rehman from TD Ameritrade, and Ned Stevanovski from Mishcon Reya. And I'll hand the ball over to the moderator, Nat Kausik, CEO of Bitglass. Nat, the ball is yours.
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you all for joining today. It's a pleasure to have you. David, Peter, Rehman, and Ned, maybe we'll start with some introductions. Would you like to go first, Ned? I'll start with you, since you're calling in from London and it's a late hour on your side of the pond.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Ned Stevanovski, and I'm the head of IT and CISO for Mishcon Reya. Mishcon Reya is a group of companies based out of London, but covering globally. We have offices London, Dubai, Singapore, and India as well. I'm responsible for the group security, and we in our group of companies we have Mishcon Reya LP, which is the legal firm. We have financial services firm, brand management firm, cybersecurity firm, and lastly, we have a discovery firm.
Thank you, Ned. Mishcon is a leader in cybersecurity and has been recognized as such. It's not just another law firm. It actually has a cybersecurity practice. Is that not the case?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So we are the only law firm in the globe now that has been CREST certified. So we provide cyber incident response. But we have a slightly different approach where most cyber incident response services will handle the technical aspect of recovery and isolation and cleanup. We actually follow the money. We start from the other way around because most incidents are financially motivated, and we do that. So we follow the money, we work with the police, we work with the courts, we do injunctions, we stop the money transfer if we can as quickly as possible, and then we do the rest.
Okay, excellent. Pleasure to have you, Ned. To follow the money, let's go over to Rehman Khan, TD Ameritrade, who deals with money. And some of those people dealing with money on TD do get in trouble and land at Mishcon. Rehman, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't deal with those people directly, but just to clarify. But no, I thank you for this opportunity. Rehman Khan, I lead the cloud and data security team at TD Ameritrade. And we recently joined Schwab as a subsidiary of Schwab. And, you know, I've been in this space for a long time, doing different roles. For the last probably 6 years, I've spent time really building our cloud security and data security practice.
Thank you, Rehman. The natural direction to go from there is probably over to David Levine, whilst Ned and you are generating all this data and money transfers. David's firm, Ricoh, is the global leader in document solutions to make sure that all those records are preserved and the copy machines that the legal offices are wearing. David, if I may turn to you and ask you to introduce yourself, please.
Sure, thanks, Nat. Yeah, David Levine, Vice President of Corporate and Information Security. I'm our Chief Security Officer. So I've got responsibility at Ricoh for physical security, cyber security, trade compliance, security strategy, access management, e-discovery, all the usual types of things. I also manage Ricoh's virtual global team. It's kind of a dotted line federated team, but I've got people in all parts of the world on that team. So happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Delighted to have you, David. And you are dialing in from Atlanta today, is that right?
I am.
Okay.
Chilly Atlanta.
Okay, welcome to have you. And Rahman, you're in St. Louis, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Chilly St. Louis too, I gather then, right? So, all roads today lead to the hospital in one fashion or the other. And so let's then turn to Peter Rucys of Tampa General, who is down in warm Tampa, we hope. And Peter, if you would like to introduce yourself and say a few words, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Pete Rucys. I'm the CISO for Tampa General Hospital. And yes, Nat, it is very, very nice out today. We had a bit of a cold spell, but it's warming up, 70s. Tampa General is located in Tampa Bay, Florida, and we are the state's level 1 trauma center for burn. We're also the poison control center for the state of Florida. We're an academic teaching non-for-profit hospital with a very, very, very strong tie to University of South Florida. So I'm handling the cybersecurity for not only our patients and our employees, but the research that's compiled from various universities across the southeastern United States, which creates its own unique challenges. All of you may be wondering how we are handling the COVID situation with healthcare and cyber. They all happen to fall on their feet and all join together with the threats that COVID has brought us in the cyber realm, along with the healthcare situation we're all facing right now. We've made great strides in our cybersecurity programming, and all of you have probably heard that healthcare seems to be leaning on the weak side of data protection and just general data hygiene best practices. I want to say that we're forerunners in this field, and we're leading by example by demonstrating that we do take data security extremely seriously at Tampa General, and to reflect that, we are on the cusp of achieving a high trust certification for the organization.
Excellent. Thanks, Pete. Enjoy your weather whilst we are on this panel. That brings us to an interesting question then. Speaking of the pandemic, as Pete introduced us, perhaps we can ask Rehman, how has the pandemic affected your organization, Rehman?
So I think we, being in the fintech, industry, I think we were well prepared when it came to really moving our organization into more of a remote model. We had roughly 12,000 associates that were literally switched over into a remote work situation. So yeah, I mean, we didn't see major impact on our infrastructure or our services per se. We did see, however, the transaction volumes, right, skyrocketing, right, because of the fluctuation of the markets. It pressure tested the trading systems, and I think we kept really well with it. I think that's that's pretty much it. I think we did well.
Interesting. So not only did the traffic on your own internal communication systems, whether they be Slack or Teams or those sorts of things, go up, the trading volumes in the market directly went up and affected your overall activity as well. Is that how we should understand it?
Yeah. No, the business, obviously, we had a few events prior to that, right? Zero commissions, which obviously creates more transactions. And then obviously with the market fluctuation, there was a lot more trading volumes. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, thanks. Let's ask Ned then. Ned, how did the pandemic, or how is the pandemic affecting your industry?
So we, similar way, we didn't really have any infrastructure challenges. We were already prepared for the remote working. We had slightly different challenges, and that's around data security, because we had to reevaluate and ensure that we can provide a safe working environment for our lawyers to work on a confidential basis whilst at home. And we have to think about what are the unintended consequences or challenges in a home working environment. Mm-hmm. And even all the way down to things like personal assistants. We know that the Alexas and Cortanas and everything else is listening in the background. Well, is that acceptable when you're working on this side of the pond? Because we know that a majority of that data is transferred in the US, being transcribed, being analyzed, even by humans. We've seen that in the T's and C's. So we've had to really analyze, dig deep in the T's and C's, what's acceptable for us. Even Microsoft, on Microsoft Teams, it states in the T's and C's that when you actually do transcribe, that the actual transcribing service will listen to and will take things like, will read attendees, will read subjects to improve their service. So we've had to really analyze video conferencing solutions. We've had to analyze home working environments, personal assistants, really to ensure that we can provide the same working environment that we did in the office, because ultimately we deal with confidential data.
Interesting. Well, that's a really interesting angle, and it hits home with me because there's a constant battle at home, speaking personally, where I am always unplugging that little voice gadget that's listening to everything in the kitchen, and my daughters keep plugging it back in because they want to tell it to do things. And I just don't like the idea that every one of our conversations is somehow being uplifted into the cloud and analyzed by a machine, perhaps that has 2 legs and 2 arms. But that's really, in the legal industry, that must be really fascinating, because you lose client attorney privilege essentially if it's being listened to by a third party. Is that not the case? That's true on both sides of the pond, right?
That's the case, but we also have a case where a lot of clients do not want their European clients do not want their data in the US.
Right.
And whilst in the US you're perfectly fine with cloud solutions, we take extra care to ensure that none of our data leaves UK or Europe.
Right.
And it adds another layer of complexity of what we do and how we do it.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that. Let's turn down to David Levine and ask him, how has the pandemic affected his industry then?
Yeah, from an industry perspective, there definitely was an impact. If you think about the things that Ricoh does, we've got multifunction devices. We do a lot of different things, but a lot of it's really centered around people being in the office. So whether it's using multifunction devices or we're running managed services inside your 4 walls and doing, print centers or all kinds of things, that changed overnight, just as like the rest of you, us sending all our employees home. So there was a big impact. So we've really spent a lot of time this year from a business perspective, looking at different revenue streams. How do we change with the times? How do we, significantly supplement what was, what we thought of as our traditional base? And, I think we were good position to leverage that because we were already doing a lot of things aside from that, but no doubt there's been a big impact. I think on the IT and security side, we were in pretty good shape. I mean, we had a lot of remote users, a lot of users that were equipped with laptops. We didn't really have any constraints relative to VPN and things like that. We had good tool sets, including Bitglass, of course, good tool sets out there. So we felt pretty good. I wouldn't say we had everything nailed. There's things we'll continue to look at because the dynamic changed. And one thing I will say, which I'm sure the rest of you dealt with too, our traditional BCP programs really were predicated, particularly for things like call centers, on, okay, call center A is not available. Fine, everything goes to call center B. Well, guess what? Call center B went home too. So, those were areas like that where there were some challenges we hadn't really thought of. We also had some customer environments where we handle customer data, do a variety of things in the document lifecycle, but those were very specifically built not to allow remote access except for very specific purposes. Well, same thing, people, again, BCP was predicated on rolling from one operation to another, and so we had to make some changes there. So definitely some lessons learned as we rolled through the pandemic, and still continue to learn because we're still trying to map out what the future is going to look like.
So in terms of your employee base, David, what percentage of the base do you think is working at home as opposed to is still going on site?
Oh gosh, now, well, it's interesting. So I think if you look at our employee base overall, most of our employees are still working at home, except those in our warehouse operations. And as far as employees that are working inside of other companies, it's really been dependent upon what their back to work plan is. Now, we have seen in a lot of cases, our folks would go back into the office before their own employees because they need us to perform critical functions inside their operation, whether their employees are there or not. So we have actually seen since the summertime, things have been on a slow climb back up with more and more employee, our managed services folks, kind of getting back to what they used to do.
Let's see. Okay. Let's then ask Pete. Then Pete, you spoke already about how he reacted to the pandemic and increased security and so forth. But there's a different dimension to the question that I'd like to ask each of you that we are experiencing in our own organization, which is, what do you think is the psychological impact to your employee base from working at home? And I ask because when I saw an article recently in the press that a major tech company is now actually providing essentially remote counseling services. Think about it as a shrink via Zoom or Teams to their employees. Is that something that maybe we'll start with you, David? Is that something that you're seeing at Ricoh, worrying about your employee health?
Well, I think we definitely we worry about it, and we have some mechanisms in place. But I haven't, I guess if I look at my own team, I had a bunch of folks that were already working remotely, if not part-time, full-time. So, I think most of us made that shift fairly well. I would say early on, some people had a harder time that just never really contemplated working at home. I also think it depends on an individual situation. I mean, certainly, both of my kids are grown and out of the house, so I'm not having to do the whole school thing and all of that. And I say that because I see a lot of our employees that, have been having to do that double, triple duty while trying to work. And some of those folks definitely, have struggled at. Although I think if I ask my wife, she's ready for me to not be working at home as much. But, I know for example, for me, I wondered if, working at home every day was going to be something I could adapt to. I now, honestly, going back to the office would seem strange.
Okay, thanks, David. What about you, Pete? In your industry, how do you see the mental impact of remote work, since you have a mix of medical professionals who have to be in the office as well as information workers who don't?
That is, you are correct, Nat. It's a unique situation that we're faced here at TGH. In the beginning of the pandemic, back in March, fortunately, if not maybe 90% of our information technology workforce had already had the capability of remote work. And previously, years ago, we actually offered as a benefit, as a perk, to work remotely a number of days per week, only coming in. So that actually was a saving grace with with the impact that we had. So it was almost as turning a light switch to flip everybody over to 100% remote. The challenges we did face are the employees that were non-clinical, non-medical staff that were deemed that they needed to be remote, that when they had never worked a remote day in their lives. That's where we had the most impact. And fortunately, with the help of, we all teamed together to assist those that needed the most help. Lots of confusion, weeks and weeks and weeks of confusion, as you can imagine, loss in productivity, plus the scare of everybody's well-being on top of it all, created I don't want to say panic, but it did create a very stressful situation that we sailed out of by providing the extra support services to our employees to assist them with the difficulties that they have and the questions they have of time tracking, maintaining their days from their homes or wherever they choose to work remotely from. And we sailed through it. we nipped it, and we've been moving smoothly along. As a matter of fact, at a meeting we had today regarding the remote workforce that we have here, the decision is we're holding steady. We're not going to rescind any remote work, even with the pending release of the vaccine.
Interesting. Okay, thanks, Pete. Let's ask Ned on the other side of the pond. Then, Ned, in your case, you're primarily in the information technology business. You don't have the mix that Pete has, where he's got clinical workers who are providing healthcare on the one hand, and then all the contextual support folks who are more information technology workers than not. Do you see, Ned, an impact on the health and well-being of your employee base as a result of remote work? Ned, can you hear us?
Sorry, we're definitely seeing an impact, because ultimately, look, we are missing the social interaction that we get in the office. We're missing those water cooler moments where people can just take off and have that easy chat where they don't get the opportunity at home. So employee well-being whilst at home, it is very important, because it's a very unique environment. When you're working from home, everything is lost. Literally, there's no difference between the days. It's just work. And it's so easy to get in difficult situations. So that's why we've had to put special programs to ensure that everyone is taken care of. Everyone has an opportunity to speak to their colleague, or to a buddy with someone within the firm, to ensure that the support is there. So from that perspective, we're organizing events, social events, Christmas carols now, DJ, all sorts of online events, just to ensure that we keep the spirit up. Because ultimately, look, when you're working from home, the big question is, how do you retain the company culture that you've had before in the office? Because you're removing the physical space, you're removing the nice offices, removing all the perks that you had of the office space, and suddenly you're in your own home office. Makes no difference whether you work from company A or company B or C, because ultimately it's the same office, the same type of work. So we had to be creative as to how we can make that difference. So definitely, absolutely, I think it's a challenge, but like everyone else, we're doing our best to ensure that we keep that, and hopefully the pandemic won't be long before it's finished.
Now, that's a very good point, insight, Ned. Let's ask Rehman his perspective, because he's going through a merger now between TD Ameritrade and Schwab. And Rehman, do you see remote work as a blessing or a curse with regard to blending the cultures of the two companies?
I don't know how much of that may be the merger, but I think that, as Ned was saying, I think there's a lot of productivity. I mean, we're seeing really good productivity gains, but the issue is that we're going from meeting to meeting, and we're not getting any pause, right? And I think what we've done is, we have certain social activities that, for instance, we get on Kahoots and we do this, question answer thing, right, within certain teams, and we, really try to create a little bit of a break. But we're definitely also seeing the impact of, children that are staying at home, especially in virtual schooling cases where, the parents are having to, manage that. And I sit on the, it's kind of our change management organization for cultural change and so on and so forth. And the big thing that I hear is that I've got children, how do we, balance that? So there are times where, certain leaders have, basically suggested to block the lunch hours, stuff like that we are giving people the flexibility, because it's just a go, go, go. And on top of that, there's a lot of information sharing that's going on, as part of Schwab as well. So absolutely, there is, a lot of work that's getting done, but at the same time, we're focusing on providing opportunities to have some fun activities. And that seems to help, but it's not like the office. I don't know when we'll go back, but there is, impact of that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we see the same thing across all of our employees as well, where folks with young children have probably been the most impacted because they have to split their time. There are no boundaries between work and home and childcare, and they have to split time between caring for their children and being responsive to their careers. So it's certainly an interesting time, which brings me sort of to the next topic, which is, because there are no boundaries, has the pandemic changed your IT security strategy in terms of how you're thinking about it in the near term and the longer term?
So, I'll say from an I'll take two aspects of it. From an operational perspective, we're not seeing any major upticks on, campaigns or data loss and, those kind of things. The risk has changed a little bit, and I think that things like VPN and some of those kind of choke points, sometimes, there is a level of adjustment from a networking perspective and so on and so forth that we're seeing. But it's not that major for us. As far as the strategy is concerned, we were already looking at zero trust design strategy from a security perspective. And part of that has been, leveraging solutions like Bitglass, right, for really letting the associates access information from anywhere on any device and still protecting our data. And I think that just to bring it to the next level, we had worked on a strategy for zero trust. Now we're in the design phase of it, and we're really, trying to accelerate that, because I think that the remote model is not going to go away completely. I think we need to just continue to enhance the experience of the associate and solving that. So that's one aspect of our IT security strategy that we're focused on. And then, I'll also use as, SaaS services, because we did see that, that it was a good model, right? We didn't have to do any scaling on our end for our, messaging and Office 365, so on and so forth. So, yeah.
Thanks, Rehman. What about you, David? Going back to David Levine at Ricoh, has the pandemic been a discontinuity that is changing your IT strategy in any way?
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, I think our core projects probably didn't particularly change, partly because they happened to align with this change, meaning we had a big digital transformation underway, and so that just kept on going. We had some other key projects that weren't necessarily impacted with the pandemic, but that isn't to say other things haven't changed. I think, to the point that we know that in the future, we'll still have probably much more work at home. I think what we'll see going into our next fiscal year is a little more emphasis on looking at the tooling and the things we're doing relative to remote workers, and whether that's more emphasis on looking at an insider threat program or looking at VPN alternatives and continuing to look at ways to make sure that our remote workers are secure and that we're really doing the right thing. So all of that probably certainly would have been going on without the pandemic. I would say the other big difference is my team spends a lot of time supporting the business, of course, and as noted with the business, looking to move in a lot of different directions. We're getting a lot of things coming in over the fence as far as new partners and new solutions and all kinds of things to look at. So we've definitely had to devote a bunch of time in evaluating and trying to keep up with the business as they're looking at a lot of different opportunities and new ways to do things as we move forward and try and determine what the future is going to look like.
Thank you, David. Let's turn to Pete then and ask him a related question where, Pete, you're in an unusual position because in your industry, the most important people in your business, essentially the care providers, the physicians and the nurses and so on, they often work at multiple hospitals. Some of them may be your own, some of them may be that of of partners and so on. So it is quite difficult for you to say, I'm going to give a laptop or a tablet or a combination thereof to each one of your doctors, for example. If you're an orthopedic surgeon, you probably practice in one hospital on Mondays and Wednesdays and another the remaining days. How do you think that the pandemic affected that model? Is it changing, a permanent change? How do you see that affecting your security strategy?
Well, the pandemic brought the pandemic, but it also brought a ton of malicious activity targeting healthcare specifically. I don't know, I have not spoken to any of my peers in other silos, but healthcare, when there were announcements in March about PPE shortages and mask shortages, we began to receive an onslaught of marketing email. Okay, it seemed harmless, people wanting to help. Now, you are correct, Nat. Our doctors are all community doctors. They all have their own private practices. They all have their own, essentially their own businesses, but they are Tampa General employees. That challenge, the prior workflow for handling those offices was to allow them to use their in-house email system to conduct their business on top of Tampa General's business. That had to stop right away due to the threat, the email threat that we saw. It was a hurricane of threatening emails that just glided right through all of our systems because they looked normal, they looked legitimate, but when in fact they were far from it. I watched these attacks go from a spray and pray type of a situation where more is best to targeted spear phishing to our senior leadership, our clinical staff, and so on. So we had to severely restrict access to the internet to a number of areas of the hospital, to include personal email, which created a gigantic business challenge. We've overcome that by keeping everybody within the production network. We've tuned our VPNs to only allow you cannot shut the services off. The VPNs essentially installed as a service, not as an application. With the deployment of Bitglass protecting our Office 365 environment, I can assure that only authorized individuals are accessing their email and our SharePoint environment. Subsequently, the partner physicians, the community doctors, they all rapidly obtained share file Office 365 access, so we can contain the threat surface and keep patient care at the top of the order. It did create a bit of a setback, but we had to overcome and adjust, and we have persevered.
Interesting. Yes, we see the attacks as they go on across all of these industries, and we definitely saw in the early days of the pandemic an uptick on attacks, particularly on research hospitals, where there were physicians working on cures and highly sensitive things. And now we're seeing attacks increase on the pharmaceutical industry and companies that are distributing pharmaceuticals, because there are often nation state actors that want to have access to vaccine information, or even we saw recently an attack from a nation state on the payment system of an organization that was in the business of distributing vaccines, where if they could hijack that, they could actually disrupt the flow of vaccines and steer them in a different direction. So there is this interesting, it's almost like a river flowing where the attackers are pointing at different parts of this pandemic as it courses through our society, where the most vulnerable point where they can get the maximum gain is being targeted at any point in time. That's really fascinating. the impact on healthcare, I think, is particularly unique because of this blend of professionals whose first and foremost responsibility is to care for their patients, and IT is a secondary activity. And oftentimes, when you attack a senior physician or an administrator, you can annoy them enough into swiping the two-factor notification by swiping it the wrong way, so they actually hit accept. And this is an attack we saw at one of our customers, where the hacker keeps attacking the two-factor system enough that when you do it to a very busy individual whose primary responsibility is something other than making sure that their emails go out, it's relatively easy to get in. You know what I'm talking about, Pete. So, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's then turn to another question. Then, against this backdrop of mounting attacks, both on the healthcare end and now moving to the distribution end, are your IT budgets as a whole affected, increased, decreased, the same? How do you see that, Pete?
My IT budget actually, financially, the hospital, when we disabled elective surgeries, we took a gigantic, everybody took a financial loss, which we have actually recovered from, or on the road to quickly recovery. Our budgets actually to be fiscally responsible until we overcome our financial hurdles, essentially everything was frozen. I do have the power to obtain and acquire goods and services if necessary and if in a dire emergency. So we all agree to this, all of the IT leaders, to just be fiscally responsible with our spend. If we need something now, we can obtain it, but pretty much we're all waiting until 2022 for any forward movement with our strategy and our goals.
2022, you say? So you assume 2021 is going to be more of the same?
It's gone. 2021's already gone.
What do you think, Ned? Let's ask Ned on the other side of the pond. How has the pandemic affected your IT budgets and IT security budgets? Is 2021 already gone for you, as Pete says, or are you still looking forward to the new year?
No, I'm looking forward to the new year. My budget wasn't affected only because in the early days of the pandemic, it became very obvious that running our own data centers or having systems in our own data centers just wasn't practical, because London grinded literally to halt. Everything stopped, even transport. So getting to a data center, even replacing a part, was just not an option. So what we decided early on is to accelerate our digital transformation and move from on-premise system completely in the cloud. So we are now on track in mid-January, literally, to be cloud-only a law firm. Along the way, obviously, a number of challenges. Moving in the cloud meant we need to protect our crown jewels, our confidential documents. And the biggest of all is our document management system that has over 200 million documents and emails. So that went in the cloud, and Bitglass plays a part in that, because it gives us that granular control, who can access what and where on which device and how. So, and because of our digital transformation implementation, we had to have the necessary cybersecurity budget to ensure that we can protect the environment, protect our data and our clients' data. So in a short, no, our budget was there to support us and what we're trying to achieve.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Well, thank you. Let's ask Rehman, now that he mentioned that he's gone to, how did he say, zero brokerage fees, Rehman? Am I correct?
Yeah.
How did that affect your IT budget?
Obviously we're in the business and of brokerage, and we did not see a major impact. In fact, as the transaction volume increased, right, we had to create more, scalability, throughput. So we went in the other direction, which is to increase that budget, right, from an overall IT infrastructure perspective and operational support perspective. We've hit record numbers on our transactions on a daily basis, and in order to support them, there's been a lot of investment. from an IT security perspective, frankly, like I said, I mean, we're in the business of protecting information, right? It's always going to be that way. Nothing really changed for us from that perspective. We still have to protect these systems, and I think for us, it wasn't any major impact to the IT security budget. I would say even, I mean, if there is any scalability type of spend to support the extra transactions for these systems that need to be protected, we've received that kind of support and budget to enable security. So it's actually been
okay. So you're seeing a different slice of life than our co-panelists are, in the sense that you're seeing a surge in activity, stock markets at record highs. Brokerage fees are down, and yet the scale and volume in the business is doing well. So, as they say, right, no matter what, the bankers always make money. So, okay, well, let's ask David Levine then. Dave, do you think that the working from home is the new normal in your industry?
Not entirely. I mean, I think going forward, well, let's roll back. Pre-pandemic, it was everyone could work at home a day a week, maybe 2 days a week. We had some permanent remote people. I think when we come out of this, it's not necessarily going to be everybody working remotely. I think we'll be in a hybrid mode. So, it could be that folks work at home 3 days a week and go into the office 2 days a week, or kind of as needed. I think there's going to be a lot more flexibility. I think we'll continue to probably reevaluate what we need by way of corporate real estate. So yeah, I don't think we're going to go. I certainly don't think we're going to go back to everybody being in the office full time. It'll be some combination thereof.
Right. Yeah, I think nobody misses the travel, or some people do, but most people don't. But it is hard to maintain relationships when remote. I think several people have observed that, right? It's really hard.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would mention too that's particularly difficult that I don't think we've touched on yet is when you onboard somebody in the pandemic. So now you're bringing somebody, I know culture was mentioned, and that's really hard when you've got somebody who wasn't indoctrinated into the culture. They're coming in cold, and yet they're working remotely. Thankfully, I onboarded couple of interns right before the pandemic. So thankfully they'd spent 6 months with us. So it was, otherwise that would have been almost impossible, particularly with young interns, to try and bring them into the fold. And then I did bring on a more senior person, which thankfully had consulted with us prior. So again, he had some knowledge. But I've seen some folks, if you ask them how it's going, where they have come into the company purely in the pandemic with no prior experience, consistently you hear, well, it's really strange. It's
Right.
Trying to figure everything out. I'm trying to figure out the company. I'm trying to figure out everything works. So definitely a big impact in that regard.
Right, that's certainly true. I have the pleasure of onboarding every employee into Bitglass because at the start of their orientation day, I come and do the warm-up act. And the other day I did one for 6 new employees. And it was quite interesting. We do hire a lot of new grads. And so we had 6 brand new grads at the first jobs out of college. And I think it is actually the hardest on them because they've gone from, a vibrant college environment, at least pre-pandemic, to a relatively isolated situation in many cases. And I think of the people that I commiserate with most is the new grads and the fresh employees that join any company, because it's, as Ned observed, it's hard to preserve the culture of the company. But what if you've never been a part of the culture of the company and you're trying to figure it out entirely through Zoom calls and Slack, right? That's certainly true. But so turning back to Pete again, Pete, do you think the new normal in your organization is remote work, particularly given the line of work in your industry?
Well, as mentioned before, our company culture is what makes our organization, and company culture is a lot of eyes-on collaboration with fellow employees and coworkers, and staff, and eliminating that physical interaction can degrade a culture. And that's in my opinion. We have discussed over the months of how would we return to normalcy in some degree, whereas everybody started coming into the office and conducting business pre-pandemic. We are heavily leaning towards somewhat of a return to normal, but we will never be at 100% in the office again. Management has already made that statement. We're actually, since business is booming right now in not such a good way, we've actually run out of staff for treating patients. So all unessential, non-clinical, non-med staff individuals that are remote right now, their spaces have been already taken and transformed into patient care areas. We're actually even talking about selling real estate and buildings that we own off of the island to consolidate our portfolio and expand more patient care areas. So I see us going back to a 50% type of normal, but not completely back to normal by all means.
Interesting. How many of the others see 50% as the new normal? Ned, 50% for you? Do you think?
Yeah, I'll probably will agree with that. Absolutely. I'm not sure we can go back to the 5 days in the office. I'm not sure that that's happening.
Okay, interesting.
I think a healthy balance between the two will probably work best.
Good. How about you, Rehman? I mean, in Ned's case, there's always the temptation of the London pubs pulling you to the office. But in St. Louis, do you still see 50% as the new normal?
Well, obviously we're spread across the U.S., right? So we have a lot of different offices. And I think that it'll be a combination. There'll be a balance. I do know that Schwab, leadership and organization is used to more of the office environment as compared to TD Ameritrade. There was a good balance of remote and in the office. So I think it'll be a combination depending on the role, depending on if you're on the branch side, then the expectation is the branches need to conduct and open business.
Are your branches open currently?
Yeah, some of them are. Some of them are. Yeah. And so I think it's a combination. There's it's going to be very a slow progression, right, of bringing people back. It's not going to all happen at once, but I think we'll have a good majority coming back, I think, to the office.
Oh, really? Okay, so that's a contrarian view. The majority will come back to the office. Let me turn to a question from a member of the audience. Luke Berg-Garrison, if I got that name right, has asked a question more around GDPR, which I think many of you are dealing with and we deal with as well. Perhaps we should start with Ned, since he's on the wrong side of the pond in that context. The question, Ned, from Luke is, how has moving to SASE been in light of GDPR? Does it help with compliance? What do you think, Ned?
It does, because it gives you that visibility of where your data is, so you can restrict. GDPR obviously forces us to know what data we have, where we have it, why we have it, and for how long we're keeping it. So SASE gives us that visibility, and it gives us the control to say we're not going to allow employees to download documents on their home PCs, because that's another copy of the data on their home PC. It allows us to do a preview only, for example. So it gives us that full control that previously we didn't have. With remote work, obviously, it's a lot worse, because suddenly not everyone is in the office. Not everyone is within the same organization, and data is accessed from BYOD to corporate devices. So having that platform that gives you the visibility and the control helps with GDPR.
Okay, thank you. Let's ask the same question of David Levine, since he's the global CISO of Ricoh, which operates in 108 countries. Am I correct, David?
Yeah, something like that. We're pretty much everywhere. Okay.
So how do you see SASE, which is in this context CASB and SWG and so forth? How do you see that in the context of GDPR, please?
Yeah, I mean, we're still evaluating some of those technologies, right? But I think absolutely, I think, that would certainly enable and help compliance as we look at that. I mean, it's a challenge to keep up with all of the different global requirements. And, the other thing we're seeing too right now, which really bolsters the need for better visibility and controls is not only, not just people working at home, but now we're bringing in groups and teams and leveraging folks all over the globe in ways we haven't before. And that just further highlights the need to pay attention to where's that person located? What are they accessing? Where's that data sitting? What's the life cycle? Where is it being stored? All that kind of stuff that we have to evaluate. So I think, that's going to help build that business case as we look to further our journey with some of these technologies. I mean, certainly, in general, leveraging, you guys for CASB was a big piece of the remote workforce, but now moving well beyond, looking to move well beyond that and covering other areas as well.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Here's another question from Mark Gage, and it's probably best directed at Pete Rucys to start with. Mark Gage is asking, do you think employers will start requiring employees to have a negative COVID-19 test? What do you think, Pete, since you're sort of straddle the business, right?
Right. That's an excellent question. I'm actually going to take that back with me back to work. From what I am seeing, again, my opinion is that I do not believe employers will require someone to undergo a medical test in order to return to work. I don't see how that would be enforced, quite honestly. Since there's a lot of a population that are opposed to any vaccinations, they're leery at this point, and any unnecessary the testing itself is not the most comfortable test. Until that test can be streamlined and a bit more appealing, possibly. But at this point, I do not see that as a requirement to return to work.
But I presume at Tampa Gen, you would expect at least the care providers to be vaccinated as quickly as the vaccine is available, right? That would be more.
Yeah, I can share a little bit what the process of procedure is for testing. I've been tested twice already, and that is only because I was exposed. I was in close proximity to an infected individual. Under only those circumstances are we being tested. We're not just being tested because we think we have it, or hey, you know what, I just want to be sure. That those are rejected. It's only with direct exposure to the virus where a test is warranted.
Okay, thank you. So here's a question that's really interesting that I think I would like to ask each of you in succession, which is, what is your advice for the next generation of CISOs? I presume there's a number of people in the audience who would like to follow in your footsteps, and we'll start with you, Pete. What is your advice for the next generation of CISOs?
Well, we all know that cloud is the top subject, and it's not going to go away. It's going to become us. It's going to become the area that we operate in. The traditional data centers, I do see a small presence, a small footprint, but minuscule compared to the past. My advice is, don't be distracted about the bells and whistles of the cloud, and learn the basics, because the basics are foundational to your success in protecting a cloud environment. That's my advice.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Ned. Ned, what's your advice to the next generation of CISOs who want to follow in your footsteps?
I'll probably say, as businesses evolve, we need to evolve too. So the next generation of CISO will probably need to expand on skills and be a bit more business focused, have access to the board, because ultimately our job is not just about the technical controls. It's about enabling the business to do its business and innovate in a secure way and protect the data. So there is a requirement to understand the business, what it does and how it works, how it functions. It's not just about having a security certification or technical controls knowledge. It's a wider piece. So focus on the business and understand exactly how it does its business, because we need to support it and we need to enable that business.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. So you would say it's not just about the cloud or the technology trends. It's more about how the technology trend affects your business or can best be leveraged for the business you're in, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Excellent.
Exactly.
Thank you. Rehman, then, in your business, which is booming, as you say, trading volumes are at all-time highs. What's your advice for the next generation of CISOs?
I would say if you haven't already bought Bitglass, buy Bitglass.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No, I'm serious. So I think I mean, Ned, I think you kind of really, that's I think even with us, when we went to Bitglass, it was about our specific business use cases, right? And the risks associated with those use cases, and how do we protect our business, right? And enable it securely. And I think that I just, I always come back to that. Look at the business use cases. Try to be specific about what you want to solve, not a general security blanket, because I think that's what diminishes the value of security. And we all have to, I think I heard it, we all have to think about our users, that they want to access information anywhere from any device, right? That's the new model. So how do you enable that business use case? I think if people need to think about it, and really data protection is kind of the core, right, part of the capability. So I think those are kind of the things that Ned mentioned. I think just kind of tagging along that, yeah.
Okay, thanks you, Rehman. What about you, David? What's your advice to the next generation of people?
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with what's been said. Ned had the key piece of what I was going to say. It's as much about the business, if not more, than ever before. So not just a technical piece, but so I guess along with that, what I'd say is, don't discount the communication skills, right? Being able to present and get your ideas across in non-technical means that matter to the business. Because whether you're presenting to the board or you're presenting to senior management, those communication and presentation skills are important. I would also say, remember to be realistic, right? Just because there's a big threat doesn't mean it's a big threat to you. It doesn't mean it's a big threat to your company. So don't go running in the door, chicken littling everything, because that's not going to go over too well. And I think the last thing I would say is, be active in the CISO community and do things like we're doing here, because I am the first one to raise my hand and say, I don't have all the answers. And every single time I participate in something like this, I learn. And you never stop learning. So get involved, don't be shy in reaching out to your peers and getting involved in your local CISO community, because it will absolutely pay dividends.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you all. With that, I'm really glad to say that we at Bitglass are delighted to have you involved in this, and it's been a pleasure. We have arrived at the end of the hour that we have set aside for this. I want to be mindful of the fact that Ned is on the wrong side of the pond, if I may say that again, Ned. And it's 8 p.m. for you. And Pete, thank you for joining us from sunny Florida. And likewise, Rehman from St. Louis. So we thank all of you for joining us, and the audience for participating and asking questions. We hope you all enjoyed that 1 hour with our August panelists. I'll turn you all over back to Kevin Shu, who is our head of marketing. And Kevin, in fact, joined the company just over the weekend, where we switched over from on-premise work to remote work. He has not met most of the people at Bitglass. Is that right, Kevin?
That's correct. In fact, I'm still waiting for my pass to get into the office. So
okay, he doesn't even have a key to the office. Okay, then.
Right.
All right. Okay.
Well, David, Ned, Pete, Rehman, thanks so much again for your time.
Well,
thank you all.
Enjoyed it.
Bye now.